everybody. I am Andra Annette, and welcome to Building Community. I have a very special guest with me tonight, Miss Rebecca Engle. She is a special education teacher who really advocates for disability, and she's also an author and a public speaker. So, because of her neurodivergent educational skills, she really brings inclusivity into her educational practices and all of her speaking engagements. So she's also authored a book, Step Into My Shoes, where she really goes over neurodivergent perspectives, right? So she has something else, um, Stitches and Stanzas, that where she really combines both writing and different perspectives of advocacy. So please help me welcome Rebecca Engle. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
So I think it's great what you're out there doing. I saw that you had posted something, and I don't think that I think there's a lot of people that are neurodivergent, and I think that they really struggle to fit in society. And I think it's really great that you're giving them that platform to really learn in a way that's conducive to their learning styles, right? So they don't feel like they're not part of, because they are part of every, you know, as an adult, I remember that I learned very different from other people growing up, right? Um,
Mhm.
and I didn't have a label for it, but I was that audio and that visual person. I needed both of those to really connect, and everybody learns different. So tell me what got you interested on this avenue, because special education is no joke. That's a great profession, right? Little
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah. My mom would always tell me stories about my childhood, and I was mistreated in school. I was on an IEP. I had to sit in my IEP meetings and hear about myself. I was nonverbal until I was 5 years old. Doctors told my mom I'd never do anything you could train a monkey to do. And so um, I had to go through school knowing all this information about myself and really trying to fight for my own needs. After the fifth grade, they removed me from my IEP and 504 completely. So I had no documentation to support my disability, which a lot of people viewed as a good thing. Oh, you've achieved greatness. Oh, you don't need it anymore. But ultimately, it led down to discrimination. It led down to me getting worse grades. It really hurt me. And I feel like the neurotypical world sees that as a congratulatory thing. And really, you're just removing legal protection from someone who doesn't have their own consent yet. So when I got to college, right before, I was like, I really need to do something for the special needs community. And teaching was I'll change some lives. And then I needed income in college. And I was like, why am I not using this to generate an income? Why am I not using the skills I've developed from fighting all these years to generate an income? So I started Stitches and Stanzas.
I love that. And I love your book. We're definitely going to have you on another show. So we do have a show, story time, that really reads from your story so that people can see that, because I think we need to put as much out there as we can. The public school system is not the best, and I can understand how a lot of children get lost. But maybe through your speaking engagements, you can really teach a lot of parents how to navigate it, because they don't understand what it's like for the child on the other side, you know, and they really do need that parental support. So it sounds like you had really good parental support, which made you more of an advocate for yourself. There's a lot of children today that don't have that parental support. So having someone out there like you fighting for them is even more instrumental in these times. And I've seen it in my career, because I've worked every aspect of health there possibly is, including with the wee ones, right? So um, tell me what made you decide to write the book.
Yeah, well, I was in college, and a professor did a research journal on books good to teach kids about refugee populations, because I'm in Texas and there's in San Antonio, and there's a very high refugee population in my city. And she goes, Becca, you should do this for the autism community. You need to find books that are good for students to learn about autism. And I was like, oh, okay. She was like, I'm going to help you. It's going to be great. And so I was like, I'm going to dig down this tunnel and start doing it. And the second I started researching, every book I found was written from the perspective of someone who wasn't autistic. I mean, could you imagine if every book about, black people was written by a white person? If every white person book about white person people was written by a black person? I mean, obviously you've seen their experiences. You may understand some of them, but it's not that first person point of view. And so I was like, this is ridiculous. There are no good books to teach kids about autism, or they were outdated. Like, it talked about things that just psychology has said, hey, don't do that anymore. And so I wanted to write a book that gave children the understanding of autism from the perspective of someone who's actually autistic.
So I have three nephews that are on the spectrum and do um and for one of those children, the mother was very involved. And I don't know why she saw it in one child as opposed to the other. But the other one had very clear signs that she didn't see. So he got help much later. And I know that impacted him on a really high level. So do you teach parents also signs of autism? Because I think that that's well needed too. And I don't want to sound mean, but there are some parents that just don't want to accept that, you know? So I have a friend that's a speech pathologist, and we have these conversations all the time because there is a parent that feels like almost at a loss because they were expecting to do certain things with their child, and now they feel like that might not happen. And we had discussed this movie that I saw when I was young, and it was about an autistic little boy, and there was absolutely no schools back then whatsoever, and this woman struggled so much to get her child the education that he really needed. And she went into his world, like back then he was rocking and doing all this stuff, so she couldn't get him to understand her, so she started, really like almost mirroring him to let him see that he was accepted and stuff. It was a beautiful story, you know. And at the end, the child, he did get better because he got that help. She got the schooling, she got all those things that he needed, right? And of course, this is in the movies. In real life, these things don't really happen, right? But at the end of the story, he saw another little boy, and he was asking what's the matter with that little boy, you know? And he went over and he brought the little boy a balloon. But I think sometimes parents place their children in schools like public schools, or instead of public schools, private schools, thinking the child might get a better education. But a lot of times those kids are even more lost because the scholastics of those schools are taught at a much more accelerated rate. And then the child feels even, less able to do it. And there's really not the teachers to educate them.
Yeah, private schools do lack special education teachers. I actually had a client who was a parent of mine who I've been working with to help with her son. And I got a text from her the other day that a private school declined her kid, and in the statement called him vaccine injured. Um,
Oh my
in
God.
the decline. And so I've seen it all. Um, and I do help parents with the signs of autism from time to time. Parents have asked me, I think my child's autistic, this and this. I do like to specify I'm not a medical provider. I do not have a medical license, so I try not to over um, do that. If they go, well, I've seen this. Do you think I should take him in? I may say yes or no. Um,
Well, that's what
but
I
I
mean.
tend
There's
not to.
a lot of that's what I mean. I'm not suggesting that you go out and give medical advice, and I'm so glad
Mhm.
that you said that. Um, but a lot of them, or sometimes it's very clear signs, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes there's different spectrums of autism, right? So sometimes you can see it more clearly in some than others. But I think that sometimes parents push their child to do things that the child is not capable of, rather than get a professional like yourself in education, special education, involved, or get them tested to have that answer. And maybe it's fear because they don't know if they're capable of giving the child what the child really needs, right? So I don't know what it is, but I'd like to maybe see more people out there educating them that these are possible signs of autism, because there are people that maybe overdiagnosed too, without fully doing the attempts, especially more so with ADHD. But some people don't really take the time to do the necessary, or follow up, or say that, the child's within their age range at this time, right? So maybe they don't send them back, hey, let's have this revisited in 6 months, right? Because maybe it's too soon to tell and the parents notice first. But I think there should be more skills like at this stage where people can say these are like some signs that you should be looking for if your age isn't developed. And I know that maybe sometimes doctors go over it, but probably not.
Yeah, there are definitely doctors who don't go over it. And then, of course, there's like misunderstandings. And then there's even in Texas, at least, in a lot of states, the educational diagnosis for autism is different than the medical diagnosis for autism. So you can be diagnosed with autism medically and not educationally, and you can be diagnosed with autism educationally but not medically. So there's also that. Um, Typically, it's more common to be diagnosed with autism medically and not educationally, than it is the other way around. But um, it is interesting that, I have a lot of parents whose kids have been diagnosed educationally autistic or medically autistic. And then the other side of the coin is like, well, he's not autistic. And so you have to try to get them that IEP help navigating the two different sides of the diagnosis.
Yeah, it's rough because I feel like they get lost in the shuffle, you know?
Mm.
And I think that's more overwhelming and more anxiety provoking because they already feel like they're a little behind, right?
Mhm.
But people, let's face it, children can be cruel
Mhm.
to one another. Maybe they're great children with their friends and foes, but sometimes when children don't understand things, they're just little adults. They say things maybe not to hurt someone's feelings, but it from the person who's going through that, it really can hurt their feelings, or make them feel like they don't belong or they don't fit in. So there has to be more inclusivity because I don't think there's enough in this area. I really don't, especially
Yeah.
educationally. I think they're really lacking in education. So there's a lot of talk on all the media about inclusivity and all that stuff, but there are still people that are really struggling to have it in their actual life and in their everyday living. And I think that's sad, you know?
Yeah. I agree, but there's also just a lack of what inclusion means. And I think that that is where it happens, right? I can be inclusive by being nice and kind to you, right? Because of your disability. And I can, include you in something, but I can include a lot of things. I can include an animal into the activity by putting it in the middle of the hands, right? Or I can include, a dog in my game by putting the dog on my lap, but the dog's not actually playing the game, right? And so it's being included, but people fail to understand that when you have inclusion, that dog in this instance actually now has to participate in the game, and they all have to have an equal participation, right? If I was going to include the dog, and people with autism and neurotypical people, those neurotypical people fail to think of stuff like that. They don't um, allow that autistic person to play the game, um, because they're so busy on just trying to keep them in the circle, and
Yeah,
keep them
and
next to
I
them.
I totally get this, and this is kind of what I meant because they're all talking about it, but it's not really happening. So it's a great idea, and the concepts are wonderful, but if you're not going to really put them into motion, then it's just a lot of talk. And
Yep.
I feel like the government and a lot of these educational departments talk the talk, but don't walk the talk.
Mhm.
So that's exactly what I meant. You just said it very beautifully. so um, so what's next for you?
Yeah, so I just finished my master's literally 2 weeks ago. And so I'm walking the stage for that, just building the business. My goal is to eventually go get my EDD, which is a doctorate in education. I'm probably going to start that in August of 2027, 2026, depending on how I'm feeling. And then I'm continuing teaching, so I'm literally going back to work next week. And then once I finish my doctorate, hopefully I'm able to help more kids. I I finishing the master's, I was able to learn about the brain and its psychology and the policies that are currently passed in that situation, and it really helped me kind of realize the lack of mental health preparedness we have in our schools and our education system, um, and the lack of change of law with new science. And it's horrifying, to be honest with you, but those things are all over social media still, those strategies that, well, the federal government endorsed this policy, and I'm like, well, nothing else in federal government has worked for you, so why are you trusting their reward system, right?
Yes,
And
yes, so
so
true.
yeah, yeah,
So true. So I think it's great what you're doing. I really just wanted to highlight you and let people know what you're doing because you've taken something that was not an easy time in your childhood and you've turned that into something amazing for other children. And kudos to you because not everybody does that. Some people to use that as a disadvantage and really don't use that to propel them forward. And I think it's great what you're doing, and I think a lot of kids are very lucky to have you. I do want to absolutely have you on the show, the story time, so we can read a little bit of your book because that will be out in more places. That will be on the TV channel, and people can know that there's a special book that they can now read and feel like it is for them. I mean, I read a lot of books, right?
yeah.
And I've said I can't even tell you how many times, oh, this book's really not for me, right?
Mhm.
But to have a book that's really about you and for you is something very special.
Yes, yeah.
Yes. So we're going to close this show for today. I want to thank you so much for coming in. I loved having you. Is there anything you want to tell the audience before we go?
That's it.
Okay. Thank you so much. And thank you, audience, for joining us and Miss Rebecca Engle. And please follow. Where can they reach you, Rebecca, if they wanted to get in touch?
Stitches Stanzas on Instagram or Stitches and Stanzas on Facebook.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.